What's up, everybody? Happy 4th of July. Today is the 246th anniversary of the United States of America. And if this holiday doesn't carry memories of burnt fingertips from bottle rockets, then I don't think you've been celebrating it correctly this whole time. In today's video, we're going to talk about some synchronicity across sports. And not just any sports, but sports that are very, very different from one another. Very often in my videos, I'm not too clear about what I believe when it comes to numerology and synchronicity, the types of things that I present on this channel. But this one has me scratching my head. I understand how people could make the case that some of these things that I'll show you are rigged, and in fact, we know for a fact that one of these events was staged and scripted. This past weekend, WWE held its annual Money in the Bank pay-per-view. And of course, WWE, or World Wrestling Entertainment, has for several decades been acknowledged as a scripted program. Obviously, it's not a real athletic competition. However, as someone who grew up as a wrestling fan, I'll always debate that there's more athleticism in the sport of pro wrestling than probably these other sports that are presented as legitimate. This past weekend, the Saudi Arabian LIV Golf Invitational Series held its first ever event in the United States of America with a tournament that was played in Portland. And you'll see July 2nd was the ending date of that tournament. Another event that we're going to look at for synchronicity here is a Rocket League tournament. So we're looking at a real sport, golf, a staged event, WWE, and now a video game. And this game Rocket League, this is actually something I mentioned a little over a month ago in one of my posts. The reason I mentioned this game is because we had this bizarre news story about a cyclist who was murdered, and the woman who killed her was named Armstrong, which of course is very odd because the most famous cyclist in recent memory is Lance Armstrong. Now that I think of it, it just so happens that this woman who was accused of killing Mariah Wilson was actually arrested. Let me verify this before I go on with this video. Yeah, look at this, just 4 days ago. So this is all coming together a little too nicely. So this past weekend, the woman who allegedly killed this cyclist named Armstrong was captured in Costa Rica. And, of course, this weekend was the Rocket League tournament that was synced up with all of this. And the reason I mentioned Rocket League in this post is because the tournament that was held that day was called Tour de Rocket League, which doesn't really make any sense because it's a game that's modeled after soccer. So why would they use a cycling term for this tournament? Well, again, this was the same day that we learned about this story about the cyclist's death. So now fast forward to this past weekend, and we had a major Rocket League tournament. And I know a little bit more about this video game because it's one I used to play. And for those who don't know a lot about my background, I kind of grew up all over the competitive gaming scene. So I won Dance Dance Revolution tournaments in 4 states. I used to travel all over the country to play Tekken. I traveled around the Midwest to play the original Halo. But in my older years, there was only really one video game I ever dived into, and it was this one, Rocket League, which, hey, it's a great game. So this past weekend, we had a spring split major, and there's only 3 or 4 of these tournaments every year. And in this tournament, YouTuber Moist Critical, his team called Moist Esports, ended up taking the victory. And the reason this ties in to all these other events is because the team they came back to beat, Team Falcons, is from Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is, of course, the country that's sponsoring this new LIV Golf Invitational Series, the first U.S. event of which was held this past weekend. Back in 2018, the Saudi Arabian government forged a widely criticized relationship with WWE. This was the beginning of a 10-year contract which would see WWE hold shows in Saudi Arabia over the next decade. Well, on the same night that Brandon Grace won the first ever LIV golf tournament in the United States, a wrestler named Liv Morgan ended up winning the women's Money in the Bank title match and then would cash in later in the night, defeating Ronda Rousey, a famous MMA fighter. And this all happened in the same night. So after about 4 or 5 years on television, this wrestler, Liv Morgan, comes out and, does it all in one night. A big fan favorite. Everyone was cheering her. Seemed like a good time. So, a lot of times I get criticism saying, how come I don't talk about positive things in Gematria? And that's a difficult thing to do because the news, which we're decoding, is very rarely positive. However, here we're looking at some very positive moments in individuals' lives. Liv Morgan, a pro wrestler for a long time, certainly achieving her dreams of becoming a champion. And at this Rocket League tournament, here we have just 15, 16-year-old kids playing. And this was a very emotional moment for this team. They were in their home country of England. They captured the championship. I put this screen cap here because you can see this guy's tearing up a little bit. So definitely good moments for them. Good moments for Moist Critical, who I don't know a whole lot about him, but seems like he's a good dude from what I've seen. So now let's dive a little bit into the numbers here, because this is all going to lead us into a very strange synchronicity with Moist Critical, whose name is Charles White, born August 2nd. Well, the other Money in the Bank ladder match winner at WWE's event was Austin Theory, whose real last name is also White, and he was also born on August 2nd. So let's take it from the top here and start with the numerology of Brandon Grace, the South African golfer who won the first ever LIV golf tournament in the United States. First, we'll look at the gematria of his full name, Brandon John Grace. The language of gematria, a very simple practice, which assigns a number to each letter in the alphabetic order relative to its position. In that basic English ordinal method, the name Brandon John Grace has a value of 139. And the number 139 is a prime number, divisible only by 1 and itself. 139 is the 34th prime number. The number 34 is significant to Grace because his last name, Grace, also sums to 34. On the date he claimed his LIV golf victory, he was 34 years and 43 days old. Of course, 43, the same digits as 34. But check out the gematria of LIV in the alphabetic order. LIV summing to 43. Grace 43 days after his birthday. In fact, notice how he goes by the nickname Gracie, which, intriguingly enough, is a very famous MMA last name. Think about the Royce Gracie, Hoist Gracie, those brothers. And as I mentioned earlier, Liv Morgan defeated Ronda Rousey to win the women's SmackDown title, and she's a former MMA fighter. But anyway, the name Gracie also sums to 43. This guy, 43 days after his birthday, just like Liv. And again, this brings us to Liv Morgan, the winner of the WWE match. And one thing that's interesting about Liv is that in this golf series, Liv comes from the Roman numeral for 54. And the reason they went with this is because instead of playing 4 rounds, totaling 72 holes, this tournament only plays 54 holes. Well, the 54th prime number is 251. And look at Liv Morgan's age on the date of this tournament and her victory, 10,251 days old. It's really no mystery why this woman was given the name Morgan by WWE. Notice how in Gematria, the name Morgan sums to 68 and 94 when we flip the alphabetic order around. Liv Morgan was born on June 8th, or 6/8 of 94. So, as usual, these wrestlers don't use their real names, and they're usually assigned names that have significant numbers like this. In regards to the 68, the word golf also equals 68, fitting for a synchronicity with a golf tournament. And really, we should be not surprised at all that we had a big sync with Money in the Bank here in the year 2022. In the reverse order, Money in the Bank sums to 222. So we get this big sync with a Saudi Arabian golf tournament. Well, in this Rocket League tournament, which was won by Moist Esports, once again, they came back to defeat Team Falcons, which was a Saudi Arabian Rocket League team. And this was kind of a big deal because this was the first time that a team from a non-major region ended up reaching the finals. In fact, this team missed previous events due to visa issues and the like. So this team wins the winner's bracket, but falls to Moist Esports. So we know that Moist Esports is owned by this YouTuber, Moist Critical. But what about Team Falcons, the Saudi Arabian Rocket League team? Well, just a couple months ago, they had a new owner. That owner is Cesar Azpilicueta, a footballer born in 1989. And I noticed that his name has matching 70 Gematria with Falcons, the team that he owns. What makes this even more interesting is that the first ever LIV golf tournament was actually held last month in June. And it was held in London, England. And it just so happens that London, England is where this past weekend's Rocket League event was held. But check out Azpilicueta's full name. Notice how this also has Gematria of 222. Once again, fitting for the year 2022. So the winner of the tournament, Moist Esports, sponsored by Critical, the YouTuber. And once again, his name is Charles White, born on August 2nd. While Liv Morgan won the WWE Women's Money in the Bank title, Austin Theory won the men's match. And Austin Theory, also with the last name White, also born on August 2nd. On top of that, notice how the name Charles White has matching 59 and 67 values with Austin White. And, I don't follow wrestling too closely, but I tend to know who, the champions are and things like that. And I know that this guy there's kind of a special storyline with him. He wasn't even scheduled to be in the match before the night began. And he's kind of linked to Vince McMahon, the owner of WWE. He's kind of Vince's chosen project, so to speak. Not sure how else to put it. And of course, Vince McMahon has been big in the news lately with all these news of affairs and whatnot going on. Well, I wanted to point out why Austin Theory was probably chosen for this particular date. Notice how on the date of Money in the Bank, he was a span of 9,101 days old. So, of course, in numerology, this represents the number 911, which is another prime number, the 156th prime number. And how perfect is this? Because of Money in the Bank, the match that he won, sums to 156 in the language of Gematria. What's also interesting about his age is that he was also exactly 1,300 weeks old. And this past weekend's Money in the Bank event was the 13th pay-per-view event. See here? The 13th Money in the Bank pay-per-view show. But there's an even bigger part of this riddle connecting to Moist Critical. And what I thought was pretty funny about this guy is that the internet seems very fond of this notion that that Moist Critical is like the Jesus of the internet. And if you click around, there's all sorts of memes that kind of compare this guy, both in imagery and in demeanor, to Jesus Christ. I mean, this stuff is all over the place. The Jesus of Twitch, the Jesus of the internet. It seems to be pretty ubiquitous with this guy. So naturally, there's a little bit of a Jesus theme in here. Now, I just mentioned the number 156 in relation to Money in the Bank and Austin Theory's age on this day. Well, 156 is connected to this 666 code. Of course, 666 is 156, so is triple sixes. Let's quickly crack open Jewish or Latin Gematria, which I consider to be the most significant large number method that I teach. Well, notice how using this method, 666 has a value of 1197. And remember, 666 connected to Jesus through the magic square of the sun. Of course, Jesus, representative of the Son of God. And the sun's magic square has a total sum of 666. So 666 equals 1197 in Jewish Gematria. Well, look how old Charles White was on the date of this Rocket League tournament when his team won. 10,197 days old, which has those same digits. Furthermore, Cesar Azpilicueta, whose team Charles White's team defeated, was 11,997 days old. So both of these guys with 1197 in their age. And when you measure between their birthdays, they're even born 1,800 days apart. And 18 is the sum of 6 plus 6 plus 6. And as far as Moist Critical being so often connected to Jesus Christ, I mean, you have to laugh at this. Moist Critical summing to 151 in the alphabetic order. Well, that's the same as Jesus Christ, 151. As far as the 666 coding, notice how the name Liv Morgan also sums to 666. This in Sumerian Gematria, which is the alphabetic order times 6. But even back in Jewish Gematria, the winner of this LIV golf tournament from this weekend, his name equals 966. Very, very similar to 666. What about the birthdays of these two men named White? August 2nd for both Austin and Charles White? Well, that date is written 8/2, and the number 82 sums to 666 in reverse Sumerian. Notice how the date August 2nd also has matching gematria with Austin White and Moist Critical, which is, again, both of those men's birthdays. But finally, there's one more strong sync that I thought was pretty interesting here. I noticed that Moist Esports, who won the Rocket League tournament this past weekend, notice how they have ordinal gematria of 188. This is the same as the team they beat in the finals, the Saudi Arabian team, Team Falcons, which also sums to 188. And this reminded me of the fact that Jesus of Nazareth sums to 188. Perhaps more fun numbers connecting us to Charles White here. But notice Jewish gematria, where we get a 1776. Well, this past Saturday, which was the final day of that LIV golf tournament, was 1,776 days after the first Great American Total Solar Eclipse. The reason that's significant here is because the Saudi Arabian golf tournament was held at Pumpkin Ridge Golf Club, which lies just a few miles outside of the path of totality of that same eclipse back in the year 2017. Again, Oregon, the 33rd state, was the first state to see that eclipse, and the Saudis held their golf tournament right outside the path there. All right, guys, so that'll do it for this video. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.